There's some people in an inflatable kayak called the Explorer K2, made by Intex. This is just a note to look it up. It looks quite good. That Rio Lanza trip that Jeff organised was a shambles. There's a story about it. He had this client called Christian, a German guy, probably relieved that I can't remember his surname. And this chap he was enamoured with Bolivia, so he was an old retired gentleman, and so just about every year he came on a Bolivian adventure with Jeff as his guide. And Jeff hired me. Did he hire me? I think he sort of said, you can come along and work, but I'm not going to pay you or something. Or was that after? Can't remember. That might have been after he deducted these Americans' refund from my pay, because he said it was my fault that we didn't get to the peak that they wanted to climb in Polabamba. It wasn't my fault. But anyway, so we went off on this journey, and we were supposed to all check out. Our passports were supposed to have exit stamps made in La Paz. And then we drove from La Paz to Franz Tamayo, Provincia Franz Tamayo, Apollo, and from Apollo down to a village called Azariamas, which was kind of the end of the road. I think it's in the Madidi National Park. And from Azariamas you can walk for 2 days through the forest, and you get to a river called the Rio Lanza on the frontier between Peru and Bolivia. What was the name of the village? Anyway, there's a footbridge across the river, and the footbridge basically goes from Bolivia to Peru. And on one side is the Parque Madidi, and on the other side is Peru. The village is San something. I'll look it up on Google Maps. I remember checking Google Maps before we left, and you could see the bridge. It's a very interesting. There are no Bolivian authorities there, and there's no electrical supply, there's no road access. The only road access is through Peru, and that's why there's this footbridge, because the people in that village, although they're in Bolivia and they're Bolivian, they get all their services from the Peruvian government, so they're Bolivian in, I don't know in what sense, but that's it. That's how they've done it for years, because there never has been a road. And on the Peruvian side, the road is a 5-minute walk. On the Bolivian side, the road is a 2-day walk. So That's how it works. But it also means there are no Park Madidi Guarda Parkes. There's nobody looking after the interests of the park. So all the time, as we approached this area, we heard chainsaws in the forest, and it was basically illegal logging in the national park. It was obviously coming from the Peru side. So at some level, the Peruvian economy was definitely doing okay out of the deal, I think. So we camped one night at the Zariamas, then hired some porters because we had an enormous weight of kit with us. Incredible, because these kayaks, there were two of them. They were very heavy, about 30 or 40 kilos, I think, and they were quite durable. So we had a whole team of porters carrying food and camping gear. I mean, Jeff was laying on this trip for an elderly foreigner, so he didn't spare the luxury. We had camp chairs and tables, and we ate well. But at some point, I ate something I shouldn't have. I think it was in Apollo. We went and ate tucumanas or something at a roadside eatery. Or I think we just had a meal, and I put the, what's it called, yapi? The hot sauce on my food, because in Bolivia in these restaurants you always get a little pot of ground up chili peppers and tomato to make your food sufficiently spicy. And I didn't usually have a problem with it, but Jeff reckoned that it was that got me, and I got a really bad stomach bug. And he gave me, this was after admonishing me for having looked up a particular antibiotic, one for treating giardia. I looked up the symptoms of giardia. I looked up in some Australian online medical database what the recommended dose of antibiotic was for this thing, and took it. And then he reprimanded. He said, "You can't do that. You can't prescribe yourself antibiotics. You've got to finish the course," and blah blah blah. And then a couple of weeks later, I get this stomach bug on the trip, and he says, "Well, we're going to get you sorted out." So he gives me 1 or 2 antibiotics, which turns out he didn't read the label. They weren't enough. They weren't the full course. So it cleared up. And then 3 days down the river in the night, it kicked in again, and it was absolute worst vomiting and diarrhea I've ever had. I was puking and shitting all night, and in a fever and lying in a hammock. Fuck, it was terrible. And they took me out for two or 3 days, and we actually had to wait in this one place. And then we carried on down the river, and a couple of days later we had to abandon it because the silly little raft that Jeff had bought, that was it. It wasn't 2 canoes. There was only 1 canoe, 1 inflatable canoe, and 1 kid's toy raft that Jeff had bought in a toy shop. Basically, it wasn't a proper raft for a river. It was just $100, $200 kind of thing you pick up in a supermarket, and it kept puncturing, and eventually they couldn't keep it inflated enough to carry on, and so we gave up the trip. And then took this awful fucking bus ride, 18 hours on a bus in Peru from this river, from way down the river, 4 days down the river to Puno. And it was 18 hours, and the driver only had one tape of Sonia Morales singing cumbia songs, and my God, I was so fed up with it. I had the loudspeaker right next to my leg, and it was full blast, and I came to absolutely hate Sonia Morales. No, I'm sure she's a lovely girl. And so during the journey, I found I could push the grill of the speaker in and stop it, and I pushed hard and hard, and eventually I concaved the entire speaker grill so that all that came out of the speaker next to me was a kind of gentle clicking vibration. But of course the other speakers were still working. But at least I wasn't deaf. Fuck, that was a terrible journey. Here comes the canoe. Hello again.
It's definitely faster to walk.
It's cool. It's only about 6. So they make much better canoes now. I can go down there again. I wonder what it weighs. The walk through the jungle was quite nice, except we had so many porters that the chance of seeing wildlife was almost nil because of the amount of noise we were making. Then we got to Puno, and we had to find the Peruvian immigration to get our passports stamped, because there's no Peruvian immigration down at this village.